game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Hello. Are you interested in conscious capitalism? What about blending together the ancient past with the trend-setting future? Well, on today's podcast, I have Kodah Pipitone. He is the founding partner of Urth Capital Advisors, entrepreneur, rational futurist, and dancer, experienced in government tech, wearable health tech, investment, and he believes ancient wisdom informs the frontier technologies. So without any delay, I'd like to welcome Kodah.
Dylan, thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to chopping it up with you and seeing where this conversation goes today.
Yeah, man. I'm super excited to rap with you. We met on a strange place at a strange time, and it was a really unique chatting with you. And so I was just struck by kind of like who you are and what you've done and how you live. And so I kind of want to first just kick things off so people can get an understanding, just a basis of what brought you into the space of creating Urth Capital Advisors. Could you tell us and just lay a little bit of the ground tracks of just what brought you up to this moment today?
For sure. Urth Capital Advisors, a firm. We're in pre-formation over there, and looking at this concept of the roots of the future are ancient. So you don't just start off general partner in such a project. I have a background in entrepreneurship, and as you mentioned in the intro, that started with government technology, moved into wearable devices, wearable tech with a design firm, and then we started some M&A work with different biohacking centers. I did some interesting para-government work during the pandemic, and ultimately have landed in this. Now, the actual birthing of Urth was really nonlinear. I had been working on a fund called Permanence Capital with a partner, Alex Aziz. We were looking at these, really laying the foundations for the future of decentralized psychedelic healing. So it was looking at brick and mortar medical spas and that were super distressed during the pandemic because you couldn't go into places. So we were buying into those and rolling them up. But the thing about them is they have home healthcare licenses. So we were looking at using that as distribution infrastructure for, at the time, ketamine or esketamine, and then expanding that as this new class of psychedelic psychiatric therapeutics becomes regulated and legalized, having this infrastructure built, this brand built, and then working with telehealth. And we had all of these grand visions of what if we had an indigenous shaman, a licensed clinical social worker, psychedelic therapeutics, all on these telehealth broadcasts and have these like 100-person home health decentralized ceremonies. And I was super amped about it. With all things in entrepreneurship, you have an idea. It strikes 7 people at the same time. I didn't find all 7 of those people, and they found a little more capital than us. And some of our deals, fell apart as a result, and were better for the entrepreneurs that we were working with. So in good faith, they went the other direction. But I gained a lot of experience, and I'm sitting here like I had a dream. How do I keep going on this dream? I know it's coming through. And through a coach, some other investment professionals had just completed the SEC process around Urth Capital Advisors, which at the time was aiming at cannabis and doing a similar thing of let's build the cannabis ecosystem to an institutional quality investment product that we could then ultimately work with pension funds and really grow the industry. And then the same thing, pandemic happened, money moved, regulations shifted, and federal legalization didn't come down. So they were like, out of luck. And I'm sitting here doing deep work, which I'd love to get into during the talk today. I'm doing my spiritual work. I'm in the Amazon, working with indigenous, reconstructing all of reality for myself. And these coaches connected us. So here I am as this investment professional. Here they are with this platform that's looking for new guidance and a new thesis. And our thesis, our value alignment just came together, and we said, let's just join forces and let's build this. That clearly was the sweet spot because doors kept opening, right? And one of the objective measures I offer people in these kind of nonlinear projects is how many synchronicities are showing up for you and how often. And when we got into stillness, got into alignment, and started spreading the good news of Urth, doors continued to open, people continued to lean in. And that's the abridged version of how I got to where I am with Urth Capital Advisors today.
That's awesome. So, awesome story. We're going to dive into a couple of these different elements as we go through this. For the area of going into, say, conscious capitalist and, being inside your body, a lot of this deep work, as you call it, what got you onto that path? Like, what got you to start doing deep work? What were you always that way, or?
Yeah. Okay. Let's start at my first catalyst, right? What's the first spiritual emergency? When I was 20, I had my, college life. I was a sophomore, and I probably didn't have the best sleep hygiene. And I had a lot of ideas. I was studying world religions, philosophy, ethics, with a concentration in economics. Didn't know I was going to end up in investment, but clearly, when you look back, I was heading towards this kind of macro global systems change through capitalism. And I'm sitting there not sleeping for several days, exploring meditation, exploring self-hypnosis. And I started having a little bit of I was unwell. Essentially, I was dreaming while awake, and I had to go to see a therapist. And that was the prescription was, 1, sleep, 2, have good sleep hygiene. So like, don't do homework in your bed. Don't have people, don't have all these social active things in your bed. Like, do that in a separate location so you have hygiene around where you sleep every night. And I started doing that, but they also said that the second piece of advice, meditation, and get serious about it, which I did. So I fortunately didn't get incarcerated on psychiatric meds, as so many people do as a result of those types of episodes. I was prescribed self-care, and I took it very seriously. So I began meditating since I was 20. So I'm 33 now, and I meditate every day, at least 20 minutes. At that time, I was doing an hour a day, and I started long distance running, and I got into a barefoot running and really lightweight, clean diet with essentially raw vegan food, so I could run really far. And that never left me. So today, I still do some kind of physical activity every day. I've moved through different trends and what that looks like. My diet has also expanded and evolved based on what I'm doing. But I've always been into this health and wellness and what's the holistic approach to mental well-being, so I can fully show up in what I'm doing. I can map this journey even more through yoga. I studied various forms. I really settled into deep study of Kundalini for about 7 years. I learned to master the on-ramps to really designer states of consciousness through breath and movement, repetitive movement and mantra. And then I got into a little bit more biohacking traditionally. I was in all of the supplements. Today I took some nootropics and adaptogenic mushrooms and all of this stuff, and that's been really present. Now, to take that story and open it up to, I think, where your audience might resonate more, okay, yoga guy, running guy, that's normal. Entrepreneurship, that's not too sensational. But then I started really working with indigenous communities. This would probably be about 7 years ago. And that came through the yoga community. It came through the meditation community. And I was one of the only entrepreneurs in the circles when I first started. But the Hutrols, Wixárika, they work with peyote ceremonially. They came to Baltimore, Maryland, where I was, and they were sharing their songs. And then when you attend some of their events, they'll invite you to an actual ceremony with their peyote medicine. And I did that, and it began really to open up how little I know about what the hell is going on here, and how much more. I think there's more power in these lineages that have transferred through ritual and through time and dedication the resonance of these songs again and again and again between generations around the same fire. And I started sitting around that fire, and I started learning those songs. And then that community invited me into the Santo Daime Church, and my first time working with ayahuasca. And after several ceremonies, I ultimately found myself in the Amazon. But let me tap the brakes a little bit on the narrative, just to to create some of the professional context that was happening simultaneous to this track of inner work. And the way that I'll open that up is to say that I believe, and a mentor told me, I first heard this from Joe McClinsky at Shift the Work. He said that you have exactly the business you're ready for. And you are the limiting factor, right? You're the limiting factor to your business's growth. So at the time when I was first meeting with the huge trolls and sitting in ceremony, I had a government technology platform that helped social workers serve more clients in homeless services, right? So the thing we were solving there is it's not a supply issue that we have homelessness. There's more than enough supply. The occupancy rates are super low, to be honest. It's more of a logistics issue. And the social infrastructure to deploy the abundance of government capital into delivering services is poor. There's technical debt in those systems. The HMIS systems are old and out of date. So we were essentially updating these systems and building better tools for social workers to help more people faster, with this ultimate thesis to connect that to tenant management systems and commercial real estate. And here I am holding that, singing ancient songs and drinking peyote while holding that. So that's the beginning of the story.
Yeah.
And I can track that, but please jump in.
Yeah, let me jump on this one. What's interesting is there's a thing with doing this say plant medicine work, right? Where you do it and it's not all about like, make as much money as you can, go, but it's about like, how do you find this thing that is fulfilling in your life, but also serves other people? It's very selfless, right? It's a very interesting thing. And the patterns of that, what did you like in terms of doing the medicine? And I don't know of like context where if you were inside one of those like, really hot teepees or what, I don't know the context of how you did it. But when you were doing it, did you go there as a way to heal yourself? Or were you going there as a way to get guidance on where you wanted to go? Like, I'm very curious about what the medicine gave to you specifically that kind of aided you in the area of your entrepreneurship.
I love that framing. So I feel like we are the medicine, first of all. These are just, they're DMT agonists, or they just kind of upregulate our body's endogenous abilities to produce these states of consciousness, as I already knew from studying Kundalini, right? So I am doing the things, my physiology is causing the experiences to happen. The exogenous brew, the medicine, which is, we process and extract and refine these to have psychiatric medication or pharmaceutical therapeutics like that. It's the same stuff. That's just an agonist that encourages or facilitates your body reaching these states that the body's capable of reaching through its own mechanisms already. So I go there to experience the hallucination of what if everything worked out exactly as I wanted to. And I would go there and I'd experience all of the weight of what I'm taking on actually being on my shoulders. And inevitably I would crush myself. I would crack. I would crumble. And it's, I was taking on homelessness as one individual. And in the first ceremony, it was like on my shoulders, and I'm, leaning for, and I'm crumbling under the weight of the thing that I've taken on. And that is literally the ego just holding it and saying like, all right, you think you got it? Here you go. We got it. And then it breaks because it actually isn't equipped to do that on its own. And it's not designed to, it didn't evolve to. So it was essentially a breaking of my arrogance again and again. And when I first experienced that, people call it an ego death or something. I embodied full sensory experience of failure, and ultimately like a bit of a death experience as a result of that failure, spiral downward. And then I realized, oh, I'm still sitting here, and oh, we're still singing the song, and oh, this is just the beginning of ceremony, and oh, what did I sign up for? Then I got humble. I got really humble, and I realized that I'm not doing this on my own, and I am the limiting factor to this business's growth because I am not asking for help, because I am not creating space in the clarity of my language for other folks to interface with me. I am not.
That's super interesting, because from what I'm hearing you say is you're going and experiencing almost like a dry run of the pressure of what it's like to, what does it look like to build this business completely on your own, which then experience itself would humble the ego by crushing you until you tapped, and the tapping was a sense of, hey, ask for help.
Yeah.
Ask for help. You don't have to do this on your own. And I think as entrepreneurs, some things that happen is that we forget that we're social creatures. We go in our little cave, we grind a bit, we hustle, we drink a whole bunch of coffee, we try to make a bunch of things happen. And then there's a thing that tends to happen, I've seen as a cycle, where sometimes if we can't rise to the occasion, we get very victim minded. We start blaming and shaming and being a victim of why I'm not where I need to be. Right. And there's that ego that can jump in front of it. Right. But what's beautiful about that is if you can actually just become selfless with what your mission is and ask for help, you can kind of transcend that victim mindedness to kind of get you to where you want to go. And so it felt like that sounds to me like a bit of what the medicine, what the experience was helping you understand.
Oh, for sure, Dylan. And the layer too, where if I'm being this like super ego driven creator type energy with no humility, when others interface with that, I'm sure you've interfaced with powerful founders who they're about to fail, or they're going to have a hostile takeover or salvage the remains of their business. It's like you don't know how they're going to act. If you're walking on the street and you see somebody whose idiosyncratic patterns don't match what you would expect, you don't know how to act on them. You don't feel safe. You'll move away from them. You'll walk. That's danger. Threat assessment, right? So I was catalyzing fear in those that I was seeking to collaborate with because I was too intense, right? And I didn't even know it. I thought I was driven by passion. I thought I was so heart-centered. Couldn't people feel it? And some people could. The other warriors out there that thought social change came from that type of action and whatnot. But the calling that I wasn't listening carefully to was to be humble and to be somewhat more gentle and precise. And in that precision, it's almost like less energy is required to move this massive thing, because less energy is collaborating, and more instances of less energy, more people pushing within their capacity from their center, and this giant flywheel is turning. But if I'm just one person pushing with all my force on one touch of this flywheel, I'm not going to move this massive stone. It's everybody touching it together a little bit within our capacity, and the thing starts spinning.
Yeah. What do you think we're actually tapping into when you experience that? Like when like these lessons that we get, they seem to be somewhat, I don't want to say universal, but they're pretty not common, but in this world. But like, what is it do you think is happening when you're experiencing those lessons?
Yeah. I think that this. I love that we're gonna go deep. I love that. This is
I don't know where you're going. This is see what happens.
So I think that there's an illusion of separation, clearly, but there's an illusion that I am that one who's doing. And in reality, there's so much outside of this that is doing. And in some sense, there's an aspect of my consciousness that is this entire room. Right, and non-local consciousness has been objectively disproven. So on the other side of these walls, the other side of that door over there, maybe there's nothing. Maybe reality is not actually existent beyond my senses of it. But if we just limit it to what I can sense right now, I am all of that in some level. So in this conversation, like I am you in a sense, and you are me, and we're co-creating this conversation. So if I am trying to be all of this conversation, there's so much of my capacity or our capacity that's not engaged because I haven't been leaving space for it. So I think to answer your question, like what is it that we're tapping into? We're tapping into this broader mesh that is actually acting. And there's so much more resource in that interdependent mesh that is all of us together, and we're tapping into how to actually be in alignment with that. And then when we get those sparks of insight, I mean, that's our next venture, that's our next project, that's the solution to this small problem in today's tasks. That's actually coming from the alignment with this broader mesh of all others.
I love that. And what it sounds like is if and this is going to go a little woo woo, but we will bring this back to science.
I got more companies to share about.
But what we're talking about this, what I think is just interesting, just to take a beat on this, because I think some people, when they maybe hear um, they do plant medicine. Oh, they just, they do, doing a bunch of drugs and they're getting high. And then this is the experience that they're having. It's just all in their mind. But there's a weird thing that, like, what you're talking about is, like, there's something about, unless you've experienced it, we're tapping into this consciousness that is above us. We're a part of it, but it's around us. Like, it's this universal unity matrix thing that we dive into and that we're connected with. And it's funny because the way you're describing it is strikingly similar to a gentleman I had on my podcast recently named Donald Hoffman, who is a neuroscientist who wrote the book The Case Against Reality. But it was from a neuroscientist perspective about how everything is consciousness. Reality isn't real. Physical time, space, none of that's real. What only thing that's real is consciousness. Our consciousness interacting with each other. Everything has consciousness, and we are just experiencing each other, which sounds like, when you're doing this medicine, you're getting more of this alignment. And when you're in this alignment, you're talking about this flywheel, right? People all working together. You mentioned it as multiple synchronicities working together in harmony, right? And so what's interesting, what I'm very struck by in terms of, like, how do you do this to reach your full potential, whether in business or in any other dynamic of life, right? You talk about this universal synchronicity that happens in alignment. In one way is through this plant medicine, but it sounds like you've done it through multiple ways to kind of create this alignment.
Yeah, let's go there. So I'll borrow from Dr. Gino Yu, who's a great mentor of mine. I don't know if you've crossed paths with him yet. I think it's a lot of value in his content. On core.live, you can find some of his talks. Closer to Truth, he's a regular guest on that one. And he'll talk about, I used the word humility earlier. This conclusion that he reaches, that there are broader forces at work. There are broader forces at work here. There's something that was here before my consciousness came up with the idea that I exist. And that something is going to be here after my sense of self has decided that I no longer exist. And being in resonance with that. All of our efforts are moving towards actions that then create a response from that, right? The field is in this. If I say I'm going to start X company and I push really hard on X company, and then I have, my friends start having the disruptions in our social relationships, and then I keep pushing, and then like I'm not raising any money, and then I'm broke, and then I keep pushing, and then I get sick, and then I keep pushing, then I have a car accident, right? All of those things, the car accident, the friends, the lack of health, the lack of resources, that was the field or the universe kind of tapping on the shoulder, and I wasn't listening. And then it was shaking me and I wasn't listening. And then it was like, listen, right? That, I think, is there's a third party in this podcast, and that is the field itself. And the more we are in tune with these higher forces at work, these greater powers, this field itself, the more synchronicities and ultimately the more success we'll have with the finite amount of effort we have to generate with. So I can't keep go.
It's interesting when you talk about, because I always think about, when we co-create realities, right? Because my model is, or I've got it from someone else along the way, is there's three realities: our external environment, what's around us, or our virtual environment; our internal environment, our narrative, or the social environment, what we co-create together. It's interesting to think about it from a co-creation standpoint of, not only am I co-creating with you, and now we is this third entity, you and me, we is this third entity, but even to an experience of the reality around us, even without people, is a we. Yes. So me experiencing nature, life around me in that reality is a we, and what the interactions is how are we affecting each other? It's an interesting thought.
Right. And this then brings in other layers. So Siddhartha Gautama, like the Buddha narrative, right? Mythology, who is here to witness my enlightenment, right? The earth is here to witness my enlightenment. He's creating, he had a full life, right? An entrepreneur, success in commercial endeavors, and then he had a romantic endeavors. He had all these different chapters in the story, and then ultimately he's sitting there under the tree, just going to sit there. And then the daughters of Mara come. They try to tempt him with seduction and whatnot, and he's just sitting there, not engaging in these distractions. And then the final kind of communication from other people to the Buddha before he reaches enlightenment is, well, who is here to witness your enlightenment? And he just taps the ground and says, the earth is here to witness my enlightenment. And that's calling back to what we're discussing right now, that the field is here to not just witness, but is also in co-creation with us in all we're doing. So when I am sitting by myself in my room, staring at a screen, talking to you and asynchronously with others, I am also fully immersed in contact in some level with all that is. And I am in co-creation and collaboration with that. So if I can tune in to that other teammate here, which is the field itself, for every decision that I'm making, right? Like just before this call, I was helping a friend's real estate firm with their brand, the back end marketing engineering, and we were doing all this stuff. And then we finished the call, and there was some tasks, and one of the workers on the team, the power went out in his house, so he couldn't do these things that are pretty time critical. And I'm like, well, I'm on this podcast, so we'll hop in later. But it's like, but maybe there's something else there. Maybe it's not the right moment to rejigger some of those accounts, right? Maybe this time is actually a gift, a contribution from a higher force that's saying, give it a minute, give it another hour, maybe give it another day before taking that action.
It's so interesting because there's this whole needing to control, wanting to control, desire to control, and I think with part of entrepreneurship, like looking back at entrepreneurship, is the crafting of turning an imaginary nothing into a real thing, a viable thing that produces some sort of economical benefit or has some sort of production capabilities that we have to imagine and bring to existence. But it's also doing it along a way that makes sense, that's of service to nature, community, the people around you, and then sometimes nature pushes back.
Oh, yes, and maybe there's a useful distinction in this. So I'm not saying do nothing, but I'm not saying sit here and just like breathe and calibrate your breathing until your business emerges from the ether. I'm not saying that. I am saying that this instrument that we're renting for 80 to maybe 120, I don't know, 150 years. Let's see what biohacking brings us. However many years we've rented this body for. It's a tool to be used, eudaimonia, right? Function. There is the flourishing action of the body that is valuable. What I'm saying is that there's that everything's happening to me, there's everything's happening by me, and then there is reality is coming through me. So this to me, by me, through me, developmental stages in how we frame our consciousness. And for the before medicine, I'd already moved through. I think yoga and meditation got me out of the world's happening to me, I'm a victim of the world, etc. I began to receive the gifts of everything I created for myself in my life. I began to receive the lessons and the skills that I cultivated in the perfect timeline to be able to be in the situations that I'm in and be of service in the ways I am. So I was through the everything's happening to me, but I was still in this, I am the creator. It's happening by me. I am that one that's creating it. And I wasn't listening to the field. I wasn't listening to others. And then it was in plant medicine that I got humbled to say that actually this is coming through me. And it's coming through me like it came through my father, and it came through his father and his father before him. And it's coming through these generations. And the power of that momentum is far greater than fully caffeinated Kodah with a full nootropic stack, in a perfect deep flow focus state. Right. So I'm saying do and be in action, but be in alignment with this intergenerational legacy of already happening momentum.
Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. And also aligns a lot with the hero's journey, right? The hero's journey is this purpose-driven self of service to the community that is on a mission, who then goes off on a journey, achieves some goal, then comes back and be the mentor for the next person along their journey and their path. And we're all this kind of humanity. I always imagine humanity as like a torch of consciousness being passed from one generation to the next, right? As we're going through the time span, right? And it's really interesting to see. And I do want to like talk about a little bit about, you talk these so alignment, a lot of
Yeah.
alignment with the physicality, the meditation, the work, all that stuff. And then you got into biohacking, and
Yeah.
you ran into you created a biohacking company, which is a little
Yeah.
unique. How did that alignment come about into being? And then let's talk a little bit about that, because I'd be very curious to see how biohacking ties into all this other things we've been
Yeah.
mentioning.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah.
So, I'm just tapping into these Kairos moments through ceremonial technology. And then what am I doing in my professional life? Well, I'm getting a little disenfranchised with the procurement timelines in government technology. We successfully did get a contract with the state of Maryland to do Host Home Inc.'s software build for them. But it was then the pandemic happened, special project budgets got eliminated, and everything got a little more competitive. I stayed in this space with the COVID Alliance. We were doing social services adaptations. I won't go too deep into that story. It was an amazing project. I met a lot of awesome people. They did a lot of impact. But I went deep internally and realized that people are unhoused because they're unhoused in their bodies. And it's when we're at home in our body, we're at home in our identity, we're at home in our purpose, our community, we're at home in our society, we're at home in our culture. And then emanates out that we're at home in our purpose, we're at home in our work, we're at home in our career. So the homelessness was a disintegration at the root from people not being in their bodies. So how can I help people and be of service, like you just said, to people for us to be more at home in our physiology that we have? And that was the wearable device design company, Soyana Technologies. Soyana is a Bolivian word for hope. And the core thesis was, I have hope for a day without screens. But it was this ultimately, we would build quantified self biometric monitoring devices that are beautiful. For now, it's kind of phase one, right? Make the Oura ring, but what's an Oura ring for women? What are some cool ear clips? What are some breath work? We can use ambient audio data for respiration and run AI analytics to get respiratory patterns and see how effective your breath work is. Let's go into this health and well-being, being in our body through smart jewelry. And then ultimately, we would hope to be well positioned as a brand and a company to work with folks like Apple, Microsoft, and Meta to do this unmediated digital participation, which is a fancy way of saying what's a day without screens? What happens when the phone components are so small they can fit in a ring or on like an ear clip with a contact lens? What's digital participation in this beautiful embedded jewelry future where our children can be ergonomic, eye contact, heart-centered, and not hunched over a screen? And I really want and still do want to be a part of engineering the infrastructure that enables that future. So that was the shift. It was, how can we build training wheels for folks to be more in their bodies? So we're actually addressing the same problem of being at home, but now we're at home in our bodies.
Yeah. It's an interesting, you went a layer deeper in that.
Yes.
No physical, but you went from the physical reality to the internal mental reality, which then you can have that as a feedback loop. What did you see through all of the work that you did? So generally speaking, one of the best things ever about creating a new business is that you very rapidly become an expert in that field to a degree, because you want to understand it and you're passionate about it and you're obsessed with it and you understand the landscape, the marketing, and like what's going on.
Yeah.
What did you do? What did you see in the area of wearables that created a lot of alignment? With your product or without your product? What do you know is like, okay, this is 100% beneficial to people?
Sure. There are incentives, and there's spend, there's investment spend that's incentivizing innovation in certain trajectories. That's on the miniaturization of components, and there are leading indicators that it's time to invest in those spaces, right? So I talked to Qualcomm's director of portfolios, where he was managing the chipsets for these different wearable devices, and Qualcomm's one of the biggest global component manufacturers for mobile devices and the chipsets for wearable devices. And we were talking also with Harpreet Singh he was the CEO of Oura Ring. And we're learning things like like this is actually 4 products based on which size ring you get. There's a whole different supply chain around each of them, a whole different margin on the product. And that's one of the things that inform the subscription model. Then looking at AR glasses and then contact lenses and things, the supply chain around that is at an inflection point. And according to Qualcomm, within 2 years, you'll be able to have full digital participation with just glasses and a watch. There will no need for a computer and a mobile phone or a mobile phone. And those things were really aligned with my worldview because the smaller components meant less resource input. So if you're looking at how we can have the benefits of this global digital infrastructure, this, we've rationalized the noosphere into some user interface that's valuable, like we're using it right now to record and distribute this podcast. That is a good thing. And I don't want to say go to the Amazon and turn off your phones and don't be on social media. I want to say be on social media and be in the jungle. So that means we need to have devices, but we can't have all these clunky things. There's an inflection point where you're going to have one piece of jewelry pass between generations that is your interface to all of it. And I think the companies that get in on that trajectory early will own the products that will establish that space of like your interface. If it's an implant or if it's a wearable, whatever, if it's non-invasive, invasive, we're consolidating based on component miniaturization, the resource inputs required, the global supply chains around semiconductors. Like we're at a point now, I think very soon, where there's going to be an objective winner. And if I had my way, I would advocate for some kind of the global infrastructure. It's sovereign, that could possibly be on chain or decentralized in some capacity, that contracts with nation states, that makes this type, like how water is a utility, your interface device should be a utility as a human being. And I can go deep on tangents over what policy is needed to ensure that countries are enrolled in such a multi-stakeholder project. But I think that we're at a point where we're going to have one device. And that's super aligned with my worldview, because I think we can have a really low impact, if not regenerative impact on the planet as we move about it and cultivate it as humans.
Yeah, you see the evolution of this tech, right? There's the general computing was just a groundbreaker, right? That's crazy, right? You have general computing. Then you got into the areas of your phone. Your phone replaced a calculator. It replaced, there's so many things your phone replaced, right? And we're getting to a point where these headsets, they're not quite as frictionless as a phone. They're a little bit more cumbersome, but they're getting there. They're a little clunky. Right now they have the fake augmented reality, which is currently my favorite augmented reality, is cameras on the outside of a VR headset that makes reality, because it is the best computing processing that I've seen so far, but still it's still a lot of friction to get there along the way. And at some point, we will plug into the brain. I don't know how far we are.
Heat is the issue, right? It's like heat. I've done early Oculus headsets were so hot, and I think even the HoloLens, Apple glasses have a heat issues. The Google Lens had heat issues. Like it's heat, it's battery capacity, but those things are being solved as we move to more efficient semiconductors and battery technology. So I'm optimistic.
It's coming.
It's
coming. It's here. People do use it. I mean, I know people. There's some people that sleep in it. They're called sleepers, right? They'll go to bed. They'll cuddle somebody remotely, and they're a teddy bear, and it will be their partner, right? There's other people do other things in VR. But we can maybe save
and ultra high resolution VR. I've seen some interesting stuff. For sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, there's a lot of things. What about in the area of biofeedback? Like, how have you used biofeedback for yourself, or how have you seen biofeedback specifically be beneficial?
Yeah. So that started with the heart math device, which I highly recommend. That gamify coherence. Yes, please. So I started working with one of my first coaches I hired in 2018 was a big heart math guy, Tristan, Heart Map Consulting. And and he had me on the M wave and getting the high scores. And then whenever I kind of challenge him on some intellectual contrivance that I was rambling about, and he would just bring me back to the heart and simplify, and then he'd just show his scores. And he'd be like, well, my heart coherence is ridiculous and yours is all, you're in dissonance. So check yourself. So I used the heart math device at first, and then from that I'd always been in meditation and hypnosis, which I don't know if you're familiar with the binaural beats and eye dosers that help you entrain different brain states. Which
I'd love to explain it though a little bit. I mean, the heart math device. I'd love to if you explain that a little bit more. Just explain some of these things. I know some of it. I think I used one a long time ago, but I would be speaking out of turn if I said, "Oh, I know exactly what it does."
Awesome. Yeah. So heart math is a heavily scientific research entity, really, and they had this product because they have this massive study going on about coherence, which is they use the word in a specific way, but there's a ratio of respiration and EKG, so your heart rate, and when your respiration and your EKG are in this synchrony, your physiology is at an optimal state. So they really simply has an app with a visualization and a breathing timer, and then you have a clip monitoring your EKG, so like monitoring your heart spikes. And if you follow that breath timer for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you get a phase shift. And then you see on the screen, it's like giving you visual confirmation that you've had that phase shift. And then wow, it's actually, and then you start to really habituate anchoring that phase in that state in your being and knowing when I'm in and out of it. That became almost like this compass, right? I'm Captain Jack Sparrow with this compass that points to your heart's desire. And I could then get into coherence with this device, and then I could engage a call and be talking to my team, and I could see when I go out of coherence. Wait, hold on, what was that you said? And I started using that to try on potential strategies at Sliana and at Host Home, and then later at Permanence Capital. Is this an aligned partnership, etc. And I just began to train it. And what I then found also was it was really good for trauma work. So as you get into these states of coherence, then things that you had been spending energy to repress bubble up on their pathway to be let go. But they bubble up and have an opportunity to be interfaced with or reprocessed or acknowledged as complete, right? Note complete. And you can do these processes psychologically to acknowledge the releasing of a somatic tension or embodied trauma. And that all came from working with the biofeedback device, the M wave from HeartMath. I went on from that and played with the Muse headset, which is another biofeedback training for the brain, different EEG monitors. If you're familiar with this guy named Ken Wilber, he's an integral theorist, highly respect him. Got to meet him this year in Sedona at an integral conference. Wow. Yeah, fascinating guy. Probably towards the end of his time in this conversation. His age is pretty advanced. But he was famous when I first saw his content online for being able to get an EEG device that measures brain states, and he could get his brain into the deep delta, which is basically death, like neurologically dead, and then fire back up again. It was like the scientists who measured him doing that were like, how are you doing this? But lab verified data, right? And then we now know like different monks through different chants and meditations can do similar things. And we know that through my time with Dr. Gino Yu, actually, he has a lab that researches these non-ordinary states of consciousness and individuals who can replicably access non-ordinary states of consciousness endogenously, so without supplements or external influence. And then they can catalyze non-ordinary states of consciousness in others through connection. So that's a fancy way of saying like these like healers, right? They do transpersonal healing because they can get in such a powerful state of consciousness with their brain waves, physiology, and they can get in a deep connection with another being. And then they can, in mirror neurons, entrainment, resonance, entrain the other person to that state. And for those who haven't practiced or have any kind of familiarity with that state of consciousness, it can be like a very accelerated healing that they can catalyze in you.
And what's amazing about that is I think unless someone's experienced that, it kind of sounds too good to be true. It sounds like,
Yeah.
how the hell, how's that sound?
X-Men.
Yeah, it sounds fake. It totally sounds fake. I read
100%.
about it one time in Michael Singer's book, The Untethered Soul. And he was talking about going around, and he said this Indian guru guy came, and he said the only time this has ever happened, the guy touched him on his heart, and then his heart just opened. And he said it was the only time some guy was able to do this. And I forget the details between who that guru person was, but apparently this was the guy's ability. He was a healer, and he swears by it, and he swears by everything. And the whole book of Michael Singer's book is about just following what the universe wants you to do, going down this path, and then going on this crazy journey where he ends up creating this huge, giant meditation community by accident, this huge, crazy medical software company by accident, almost gets indicted by the government, and he's just along the journey, just saying yes to the adventure. It's crazy. So, but that's but that piece about that, it's like I still have problems believing that in my own mind. Of believing that someone can, like, logic. I'm like, how does that work? How can someone touch you and cause that to happen?
So one of the things that opened my mind to these latent abilities, we there's so much we don't know, right? To Landmark 101, right? There's what we know, we know we don't know. Like I don't know some mathematical formula or something. And there's what I don't know that I don't know. And there's an infinite scale to what I don't know. And a lot of the stuff we don't know that we aren't skilled in is around this physiology right here, this planet, this body, this moment, and what it's capable of. Right. And we can give context to say why that is. It's so loud in our society. There's so many like combustion engines, the electricity distribution infrastructure. There's a lot of noise in this epoch of human development that we find ourselves in. So maybe we're just not chill enough to tap into our higher order sensitivities, or as the Indian mystics would say, our higher order siddhi. It doesn't mean we don't have them on board right now without a Neuralink. So I want to say that first, and then say one of the things that opened me up to it was right back to heart math. When I first did my the first global synchronization event, which was just about 20,000 people. Is that right? Was it 20,000 or 200,000 people on multiple Zooms tethered in through some broadcast, real-time event during the pandemic? We were all doing coherence meditation together. We're all breathing and respirating, getting the app. We were all in the green, doing that together. And they were on the Zoom. People were chanting, people were breathing, and these elders were leading this session, and it was this global healing event. And then they had some scientists that were measuring, and they measured a spike in the bioelectric field of planet Earth. And it was like, wait a minute, we just had an impact by this many people, this small number of people being in coherence. It had an impact on the planet's coherence. Wait a minute, what are we doing here? We're stewards of this Earth. What are we doing here? What if our entire commercial drivers of our economy incentivized this kind of coherence? What if our businesses were all about making people be more in their bodies, be more in their hearts, be more in their communities, more in their purpose, more in their in love, and what would be possible then? I just got activated. Yeah.
Is that one of those moments for you? Because what it sounds like to me is like a lot of the work that you've done, from helping with the homeless, having people being embodied in their consciousness, to this conscious capitalist direction that you've gone in. Was that one of those moments that you thought about, how could I use my entrepreneurship skills to kind of create this impact? Was that?
Oh yeah, Dylan. That, right there was like, how can I scale this? What does scale look like? What is an economy incentivized around this? What kind of, because capitalism is almost like inaccurate to describe the late stage capitalism we're experiencing now. There are so many more metrics and information involved in commercial exchange, the lifestyle of health and wellness, aspirational consumers, ESG. There's so much more And it's all just information, but it is impacting market dynamics. So it is real, even though it is just information. And I think that there's this balance between policy kind of coerced market dynamics and real organic market dynamics. And what's the most organic influence in the market, but the human beings that are generating the market. So that's us, and it's us and our bodies and our coherence emanating out to a scale that impacts the planet. So like, if you want to scale something, scale coherence.
So then if you're looking at that, bring me through what you're doing right now with the whole, with
Sure.
your firm,
With Urth.
if you would. Yeah,
Yeah.
with Urth.
Urth Capital. I love it.
Talk to me about this and talk to me about like, what is your mission with Urth? What is the, like, how does all of this integrate to what are you doing today?
Yeah. Well, I think you started this off, and you find my website at kodahpip.com. It's the roots of the future are ancient, right? The roots of the future are ancient, right? Throughout all history, Homo sapiens have had this heart and this lungs, and we've been breathing, we've been accessing coherence. Maybe we've been scaling it through song and narrative. Now we've got some more sophistication. We've maybe had a little bit more mycelial-induced neurological development going on. I don't know, Paul Stamets, how scientific things are these days, but we've got a little bit more cognitive horsepower, and we've built a little more sophisticated, interdependent infrastructure in our economies. So why not align all of that? Why not align all of that? And I thought it was going to be this M&A activity with the biohacking med spas. That I encourage people to start to do that. A lot of players have built some successful brands in the space. When I got deep into the next order, the higher order of investment on that, the kind of agglomerations within portfolios in psychedelic venture capital, I realized it was a little too early to bring in larger tranches. So a fund-to-fund strategy is not well timed in psychedelic therapeutics right now. It may be in the near future, but from where I'm standing, legacy players, most big pharma essentially is going to drain the IP out of that space, and their playbook, their strategies are still too dominant for some of these more brittle ecosystems that are so subject to these volatile policies and regional specific policies. So I think there's going to be still some dissonance before this stabilizes. But if pharma isn't the space to compete against, maybe we can work with pharma in a more reformist bridge building type way, this intergenerational legacy type conversation, where we can work with these macro structures within the level, inducing instability because of innovation, but not inducing so much instability that they lose their commercial drivers or their dominance. We can then align legacy stakeholders and these emergent stakeholders to a future that works for all of them. So taking off my social justice hat in this kind of investment activism or whatnot, and just say, like, where are the numbers right now? And the numbers are saying it's AI, it's synthetic biology, it's life sciences, and there's a lot of opportunity in the space right now for healing, for healing. And if we can bring macro investments into healing, I'm all for it. So, and that's going to mean downstream healthier people, generating healthier culture, generating healthier products, services, and art that brings about a better world. So Urth is the roots of the future are ancient. And we're really just looking at these late stage venture funds and picking the best of those funds, the most compliant of those funds as well, with regulations, to build a platform later for things like pension and larger stakeholders to come in. And on the more personal level, for some of these family offices that really built the world that we're all living in, for them to be a part of what's next and be humble in that participation, to experience the medicine for themselves, to be a part of this next generation of leadership, to be a part of this next generation of innovation, and to build that bridge. So Urth is about that. Urth is a container for family offices and institutions to participate in this future of healing.
I love that. So that what you're saying is that in order to heal the planet, we have to heal ourselves. The best way to do that is through investing in the latest and greatest technologies in medicines, whether it's AI, biosynthetic technologies, or anything else, and be able to invest in those companies that are already making deep impact in the space and use that as an activism form of investments to be able to create deeper, stronger impact. And that's kind of the thesis to it, to a degree, is
Yeah.
is really being able to use that as an impact. Now, if that's the mission, right, is to help people that help people in this way. What is the dragon? What is the thing so difficult to overcome? You might need to change who you are in order to get what you need.
The dragon's always big and scary, right? It's fear. And fear looks different for each stakeholder in these projects. So the one distinction is that the legacy momentum of these stakeholders in these industries, they carve a deep wake, and that wake opens up spaces for these new players to scale up, right? So by being in alignment and alliance with some legacy stakeholders, we'll have good perspective over where the blue water is, right? And then we'll have opportunities for these follow-on investments or direct investments, sidecar opportunities into some of these up-and-coming stars, because we'll have that perspective, and that's just a function of the model. Now, what is the dragon? I mean, the dragon of failure is I feel like that one is such a friend now. It's like I'm hanging out with failure all the time, you know. but the dragon for the stakeholder that I think is the scariest is when I look at these the legacy players, look at these family offices who have enjoyed comfort and authority, and now we're in a world where if you're in your 60s or 70s, and maybe your son or daughter is pretty tech literate, but your grandkids are like have a phygital existence, right? It's a physical digital hybrid existence, and their identity is disaggregated across various digital platforms, and then their reality is augmented with audio and visual synesthetic technology of if it's devices, or if it's like spatialized sonic audio, like spatialized audio. Like there's so much coming that's fragmenting the identities of Gen Z and thereafter. How scary is that to a grandparent right now?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I'm the bridge, and I go like, hey, patriarch, or hey, matriarch, who may or may not be on the investment committee, but is ultimately the decision maker. Do not be afraid. We have intergenerational integrity. We have the trust of the next generation of innovators and entrepreneurs, and we are coming here to earn your trust. Let's have dinner. Right. And that's the work right now, is to not lose the elders. Because I think with a young, look, when I was I'm in my 30s now, but when I was in my 20s, I was going so fast, I was scaring the elders, and I needed to slow down. So I know from experience what it's like to not successfully raise capital because I was too intense in my conviction that I was right, and not realizing that the wisdom of the elders is worth the patience.
Love that. The wisdom of the elders is worth the patience. I think often we decide to go so hard and so fast because we want it now, when really it's about taking that beat, taking that section, and making sure that everybody understands that we are on a ride. We are going somewhere that we've never been before as humanity, and we all are evolving, and the young kids have less to change, and we know that change is painful and comfortable and scary. But at the same time, if we're all going together and we're making sure that everybody's on board, then you can make that transition knowing that the intention is really going to help set the direction.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And the intention is good. And I think the intentions are as pure as our consciousness allows, and our global mythology or our narrative allows us to articulate. And that's the work of artists in cultural engineering is critical right now. I think folks like Disney Family Office are doing amazing things to create more expansion in values that are driving artistic creation and expression, which allows us to envision futures and then engineer and construct commercial drivers of those futures becoming tangible. But that's a separate conversation. I think that there's a nuance in this too around another fear of too much plasticity. So we started this conversation going deep on psychedelics. It's super trendy. I think it's like very much a dominant force in the culture, and always has been throughout time. There was maybe a brief moment from like the 50s until the early 2000s where it was taboo, but I think we're moving through that hiccup. in American culture, at least, and the rest of the world soon. But there is still risk that too much of this unformed mind, too much plasticity, too much ego death creates too much lack of the generative principle, lack of generation, right? And that's different from doing. But if, for example, if you wanted to neutralize the innovative potential of a country, maybe invest in the removal of certain regulations on certain medicines and watch what happens, right? And that could very well be a reality in some foreign policy decisions right now in regards to the U.S. Leadership. And I'm just speculating, but like if you imagine that a very intellectually rigorous country or culture is making certain moves and we're making other moves, that has to interface. Now, I say the power of the heart will win, but it may mean structural power will shift as a result of some of these policy decisions. So there's a whole layer here with another dragon, is how much of this Promethean fire of these technologies of ecstasis are to be saturated into the culture without the right channels being established in that culture.
Yes, yeah. Let the Promethean fire fuel us and not burn us.
Yes. We all playing with it.
Yeah. Oh, I often feel like a monkey with a rifle with all this technology around me. I'm like, what does this do? It's so powerful. Kodah, it's been awesome having you on this show. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about before you tell them how to get a hold of you?
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for the space. I'm grateful for the time in each of your lives. And I started off speaking a little bit about humility, and I just want to maybe wrap up with that. Like, humility is powerful, right? Humility is powerful, and we interface with authority, and we gain authority, and then have responsibility of others and leadership. And I think all that sources from humility. So I just wanted to just come right back to that. And again, say thank you for the time and the space.
I love it, brother. And if people want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Yeah. So at Kodah_Pip, that's KODAH_ P as in purple, IP, on the IG over there. It's KodahPip.com as well. I've got a little chatbot email thing going on the website, and I'll check that. And I'd love to be in communication, see how I can be helpful in whatever you're creating, and or see how we can collaborate in some generative ways in the near future. Love to be of service.
Beautiful. Kodah, thank you for your time. It's an honor and pleasure, my friend, and I'll see you on the other side.
All right. Be well.
Take care now. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes Quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or, if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you for listening.